For these 6 individuals, betrayal and injustice became the catalyst for deadly vengeance. From business partnerships gone wrong to family betrayals, these are the stories of people who chose murder as their ultimate form of revenge. It was October 14th, 2015, and the autumn evening cast long shadows across a private marina in Seattle, where local business owners and investors gathered for their monthly networking event. The docks buzzed with clinking glasses and quiet conversations as guests celebrated another successful quarter. Trevor Blackwood adjusted his designer suit as he mingled among the crowd on his 60-foot yacht, his confident smile masking months of building anxiety. At 42, the successful software entrepreneur had built his reputation on innovation and trustworthiness, but behind the facade lay financial crimes that threatened to destroy everything. His software company had become one of Seattle's most promising startups, but Trevor had been secretly siphoning funds into offshore accounts for over 2 years. Trevor's former business partner and childhood friend, Daniel Rodriguez, had discovered the embezzlement 6 months earlier when inconsistencies led to a devastating audit. The betrayal had cost Daniel his life savings, home, marriage, and custody of his 2 young children. Daniel had trusted Trevor completely, even signing over temporary power of attorney while hospitalized for surgery, a decision Trevor quietly used to access company accounts. The discovery had sent Daniel into a downward spiral of depression and rage. Forced to move into his car after losing his house, he worked menial jobs while his former partner continued living in luxury. For 8 months, Daniel had been planning his revenge, studying Trevor's routines and learning he hosted yacht club gatherings on the second Tuesday of every month. Daniel had secured a position with the catering company servicing the events, working legitimate jobs for months to establish cover, while fantasizing about confronting the man who destroyed his life. That evening, Daniel arrived wearing the catering uniform, his face hidden beneath a baseball cap as he carried trays through the crowd. He watched Trevor for over an hour, waiting for the perfect moment when his former partner would be alone. The opportunity came when Trevor stepped onto the yacht's upper deck for a private phone call. According to Daniel's later confession to investigators, he followed up the narrow stairs, heart pounding as he prepared for the confrontation he had rehearsed countless times. When Trevor ended his call and turned around, the shock of recognition was immediate. Daniel revealed bank statements and transfer records proving the extent of Trevor's financial crimes. Trevor's surprise quickly turned to arrogance as he dismissed Daniel's accusations and threatened to have him arrested for trespassing. The callous response triggered something primal in Daniel, who lunged at his former friend with years of pent-up rage. The 2 men struggled violently near the yacht's railing, their fight hidden from party guests below. During the struggle, Trevor lost his footing and fell backward over the railing, plunging 15 feet into the dark waters of Puget Sound. Daniel watched in stunned silence as Trevor thrashed in the cold water, calling for help that Daniel chose not to provide. Within minutes, Trevor had disappeared beneath the surface. Daniel calmly returned to his catering duties. The splash had gone unheard amid the music and chatter from nearby boats, and by the time anyone realized Trevor was missing, nearly an hour had passed. Security cameras captured Daniel leaving at shift's end, but the death was initially ruled accidental drowning. The guilt consumed Daniel over following weeks, driving him to send anonymous tips that directed investigators back to Trevor's financial crimes. When police traced the emails to Daniel's work computer, he confessed, saying Trevor's death brought him no satisfaction. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. It was June 7, 2016, and the summer heat in Nashville reached 89 degrees as the city's music industry prepared for another busy evening. In the affluent Belle Meade neighborhood, sprawling homes sat quietly behind manicured lawns and wrought iron gates. Sarah Morrison stood in her granite kitchen, carefully preparing her husband's favorite meal, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. At 45, the former registered nurse had spent 15 years married to Bradley Morrison, a successful country music producer whose infidelities had finally pushed her beyond the breaking point. Her medical background had given her access to knowledge that most scorned wives could never obtain. Sarah's discovery of Bradley's affairs had begun 3 months earlier, when she found explicit messages on his phone. The evidence revealed a pattern of cheating involving multiple women from the music industry. Bradley had been using their joint accounts to fund expensive gifts and weekend getaways with his mistresses, spending money Sarah had helped earn through her nursing career. The betrayal had been devastating, but Sarah's response was methodical. She spent weeks documenting evidence while pretending to work on their marriage, secretly researching difficult-to-detect compounds during night shifts at a Nashville hospital. She obtained the compound through an anonymous online purchase, later traced to an account registered to the household. Her pharmaceutical knowledge provided the perfect weapon. According to her later confession, Sarah had chosen a slow-acting neurotoxin that would mimic heart attack symptoms, difficult to detect in standard autopsies. She practiced timing and dosage for weeks, calculating the exact amount needed to ensure Bradley's death while avoiding suspicion. That evening, she served Bradley his anniversary dinner with his favorite wine, into which she had mixed the compound. Phone logs and timestamps later confirmed the timing Sarah described. She sat with him for about 30 minutes as he began showing signs of distress. Bradley reportedly attributed his chest pains to stress from work and discussed his latest recording project, unaware his wife was orchestrating his death. Sarah expressed concern and suggested he rest, maintaining her composure as his condition deteriorated. Records show she waited 12 minutes before calling 911, ensuring paramedics would arrive too late. When first responders entered, she was performing CPR and providing medical details with professional precision. Bradley was pronounced dead 45 minutes later. Initial results listed cardiac arrest, but extended toxicology, ordered after examiners noted unusual organ markers, detected trace amounts of a rare cardiac-affecting compound. Sarah's medical background initially made her seem unlikely, but her documentation of Bradley's affairs provided clear motive when police searched their computer. Investigators matched an online purchase traced to the household with microscopic residue recovered from the decanter and confronted Sarah with the evidence. She confessed, explaining she wanted Bradley to experience the same betrayal she had felt. Sarah was sentenced to life without parole, showing no remorse and stating Bradley deserved his fate. It was March 18th, 2014, and the spring afternoon sun beat down on the asphalt parking lot of a Phoenix high school, where the temperature had already reached 95 degrees. The sprawling campus sat empty except for a few cars belonging to teachers and students attending after-school activities, creating the perfect setting for a confrontation that had been building for over 2 years. Nathan Williams sat in his beat-up Honda Civic, watching the school's main entrance through dark sunglasses as he waited for his target to appear. At 16, the quiet sophomore had endured relentless bullying from Kyle Henderson, a popular senior whose torment had escalated from verbal abuse to physical violence and public humiliation. Nathan's grades had suffered, his social life had disappeared, and his mental health had deteriorated to the point where revenge seemed like his only option. Kyle's bullying campaign had begun during Nathan's freshman year, starting with name-calling before evolving into serious harassment. Kyle had recruited other students to participate, creating videos of Nathan being pushed and humiliated that were posted on social media for the entire school to see. The psychological torture had been systematic and cruel, designed to isolate Nathan completely from his peers. Nathan's parents had repeatedly contacted school administrators, but their complaints were dismissed or resulted in ineffective interventions that only made Kyle's behavior worse. The school's anti-bullying policies existed on paper but were rarely enforced, leaving vulnerable students to fend for themselves. The system's failure had pushed Nathan toward increasingly dark thoughts about revenge. Over the past 6 months, Nathan had quietly collected parts and pieced together a crude, improvised explosive device, a weapon investigators later described in vague forensic terms. He'd rehearsed the timing and worked the plan around the school's rhythms. Rather than placing it in the middle of a crowded lunch, Nathan had slipped the device into position during a quieter window earlier that day, when the lot was largely empty. The bomb detonated when Kyle returned to his truck, the blast destroying the vehicle and killing him instantly. The bomb was designed to detonate when Kyle started his engine. Based on surveillance footage and Nathan's later confession, investigators determined that Kyle entered his truck shortly before 4 p.m. Moments after the ignition engaged, a blast erupted from beneath the vehicle, destroying it instantly and killing Kyle on impact. The explosion shattered windows in the nearby school building and damaged several vehicles, creating chaos that brought emergency responders racing to campus. Witnesses later reported seeing Nathan leave the area shortly after the blast. He was arrested 3 hours later at his home, where police recovered a detailed confession letter on his desk. Nathan was charged as an adult with premeditated murder. The school faced intense scrutiny for its failure to address the repeated bullying, and Nathan's parents later filed lawsuits that exposed the administration's negligence. It was December 3rd, 2017, and the winter evening brought an early darkness to downtown Chicago. The city's financial district had already emptied, leaving a 40-story office tower nearly deserted, except for a few guards and employees working late. David Park sat in his rental car in the building's underground parking garage, his hands trembling from both the cold and adrenaline coursing through his veins. At 38, the former accounting manager had spent the last 8 months planning his revenge against Patricia Wells, the human resources director who had destroyed his life by exposing his embezzlement and ensuring his criminal prosecution. David's world had collapsed when Patricia discovered his theft of company funds, leading to his termination, arrest, and the loss of everything he had worked to build. David's embezzlement had started small, with minor adjustments to expense reports and petty cash withdrawals that he justified as compensation for his underpaid position. Over 2 years, the amounts had grown larger as David became more confident in manipulating the company's financial systems. He had been stealing approximately $2,000 per month, money used to maintain his lifestyle and support his family's expensive tastes. Patricia's discovery had been thorough and devastating, revealing not just recent crimes but a pattern of financial manipulation stretching back to David's first year. Her investigation uncovered forged receipts, falsified vendor payments, and unauthorized transfers totaling over $50,000. Patricia had presented the evidence to company executives with clinical precision. The criminal charges that followed destroyed David's marriage, cost him his home, and left him unemployed and unemployable. His wife had taken their children and moved across the country, citing the shame David had brought upon their family. David had been living in a cheap motel for months, working odd jobs and planning revenge against the woman who exposed his crimes. David had been studying the tower's security systems and Patricia's routines for weeks, learning she often worked late on Sunday evenings when the building was nearly empty. According to surveillance footage and recovered evidence, David used a fake security uniform to gain access to the underground garage. Footage later reviewed by investigators showed Patricia's silver BMW pulling into her reserved space near the elevator bank. David approached as she gathered her belongings, his counterfeit badge visible while he claimed there had been reports of suspicious activity. Investigators noted that Patricia appeared momentarily hesitant, but did not realize he was armed. Building cameras and Patricia's phone records confirmed that David forced her into the elevator at gunpoint, pressing the button for the 23rd floor where her office was located. During the tense ride, he instructed her to call her family while holding the weapon to her head. Audio recovered from the call captured Patricia's calm voice as she tried not to alarm her husband. Security logs and hallway footage reconstructed the next sequence. David led Patricia to her office and forced her to sit at her desk while he ranted about his prosecution and the collapse of his family. Patricia remained composed, occasionally attempting to reason with him. When guards responded to reports of shouting from the 23rd floor, David panicked and fired twice before fleeing toward the stairwell. Police body camera footage and incident reports indicated that officers cornered David between the 15th and 16th floors, where he turned the gun on himself rather than surrender. Both victims died from their wounds, closing a chain of events that began with David's decision to steal from his employer. The investigation later exposed serious weaknesses in the tower's access control system and resulted in lawsuits against both the building management company and David's former employer. Patricia's family went on to establish a foundation supporting workplace violence prevention. It was August 29th, 2013, and the late summer heat in Austin reached 102 degrees as the city's vibrant downtown district prepared for another busy evening of dining and entertainment. The popular restaurant scene along South Congress Avenue attracted locals and tourists alike, creating a bustling atmosphere that masked the deadly drama about to unfold in one establishment's parking lot. Elena Vasquez sat in her car across the street from a downtown restaurant, watching through tinted windows as her ex-boyfriend Cameron Rodriguez worked his evening shift as the restaurant's manager. At 27, Elena had been consumed by thoughts of revenge for the 6 months since discovering Cameron's affair with her younger sister Maria, a betrayal that had destroyed not only their 3-year relationship, but also her relationship with her family. The discovery had sent Elena into a spiral of depression and rage that therapy had failed to address. Cameron's affair with Maria had continued for over a year before Elena discovered it. According to later family statements, the two had met frequently at Elena's apartment while she worked her nursing shifts. Family members told investigators that the confrontation that followed was heated and led to a permanent break within the household. After the discovery, Elena became estranged from both her partner and her family. Statements from relatives described how Maria, once her closest confidant, maintained contact with their parents, while Elena withdrew completely. When Maria later announced her pregnancy with Cameron's child, family records show that their parents chose to support her, leaving Elena isolated. Court records show Elena had been seeing a therapist and was prescribed antidepressants during that period. Purchase receipts and range logs confirm she legally bought a .38 caliber revolver and practiced at a local shooting range for several weeks. Friends later told investigators she claimed she was learning self-defense. Investigators found planning notes and messages indicating she intended to confront Cameron in public. Evidence and staff statements established that Cameron typically left the restaurant around 10 p.m. on weeknights with a hostess named Jessica. That predictable routine gave Elena repeated opportunities to observe and plan her approach. That evening, witness statements and security footage later confirmed that Elena waited in the restaurant's parking lot until Cameron and Jessica emerged from the building, laughing and holding hands as they walked toward Cameron's car. Elena approached them with the revolver concealed in her purse. Footage showed her stepping forward and drawing the weapon moments later. Cameron appeared to notice her and stepped in front of Jessica as the confrontation began. Elena fired 6 shots, striking Cameron 4 times in the torso. Jessica screamed and nearby patrons took cover behind parked cars. When the gun was empty, Elena placed it on the ground and sat on the curb, remaining there until police arrived minutes later. She was arrested without resistance and later pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, expressing remorse for the killing, but stating in court that anger over the betrayal had driven her actions. Jessica required extensive therapy to cope with the trauma of witnessing the shooting, while Elena's family was further torn apart by the revelation that Maria's affair had led to murder. Elena was sentenced to life in prison, where she continues to serve her sentence while Cameron's family struggles to understand how a relationship dispute could have escalated to such deadly violence. The restaurant where Cameron worked installed a memorial plaque in his honor and implemented new security measures to protect their staff from similar incidents. It was February 11th, 2018, and the winter snow in Denver had created treacherous driving conditions throughout the city, with black ice covering the roads, where 8-year-old Emma Williams had been struck and killed 6 months earlier. The intersection of Maple Street and 15th Avenue had become a shrine of flowers and teddy bears, a constant reminder to Robert Williams of the daughter he had lost and the justice he had been denied. Robert sat in his pickup truck outside Murphy's Tavern, watching through the frosted windshield as Jonathan Pierce celebrated his 34th birthday with friends inside the dimly lit bar. At 41, the grieving father had spent every day since his daughter's death planning this moment. Court testimony and psychological evaluations later described Robert as fixated on the perceived injustice of the lenient 18-month sentence that Jonathan had received for the hit-and-run accident that had destroyed Robert's world. Court records show the charges were reduced after defense attorneys argued that Pierce's alcoholism required treatment rather than incarceration. Police reports and witness statements later confirmed that Pierce's BMW struck Emma as she crossed Maple Street on a Tuesday morning as she walked to school along her usual route, a path she had taken safely hundreds of times before. Jonathan had been driving home from an all-night drinking session when his vehicle struck Emma at 45 miles per hour, throwing her small body 30 feet into a chain-link fence. Robert had been walking behind Emma, planning to surprise her with a lunch visit at school, and had watched helplessly as his daughter died in his arms while Jonathan fled the scene. The investigation had quickly identified Jonathan through witness descriptions and damage to his vehicle, but his family's wealth and connections had influenced every aspect of his prosecution. Jonathan served only 14 months in a minimum security facility that resembled a country club more than a prison. Robert had attended every court hearing, watching in disbelief as the justice system failed his daughter. Robert's marriage had collapsed under the weight of grief and anger, with his wife Sarah unable to cope with his obsession with revenge and his descent into alcoholism. She had moved to California with their surviving son, leaving Robert alone in the house where Emma's bedroom remained exactly as she had left it. Robert had lost his job as a construction foreman due to his drinking and erratic behavior, spending his days researching Jonathan's activities and planning his revenge. Investigators later found surveillance notes and phone records confirming he had tracked Pierce's movements for weeks before the killing, learning his routines and waiting for the perfect opportunity to confront him. Jonathan had returned to his previous lifestyle of heavy drinking and partying after his release from prison, showing no apparent remorse for Emma's death. That evening, Robert waited in the tavern's parking lot until Jonathan emerged alone, stumbling slightly from the alcohol he had consumed during his birthday celebration. Robert approached him with a tire iron concealed behind his back, his heart pounding as he prepared to avenge his daughter's death. When Jonathan saw Robert approaching, he showed no recognition or concern, treating the encounter as a minor inconvenience. Robert confronted Jonathan about Emma's death, showing him photos of his daughter's funeral and describing the impact of her loss on his family. According to Robert's later confession, Pierce dismissed his accusations and told him to move on, triggering the assault. Witnesses in nearby vehicles reported hearing shouting moments before the assault began. Robert began beating Jonathan with the tire iron while screaming his daughter's name. Robert continued the assault long after Jonathan had stopped moving, his grief and anger pouring out in a frenzy of violence that left Jonathan's body barely recognizable. When his rage was finally spent, Robert sat down next to the body and called 911. Confessing to the murder while waiting for police to arrive. Robert was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the judge acknowledging the emotional circumstances that had led to the crime, while condemning the vigilante justice. The case divided public opinion, with many sympathizing with Robert's grief, while others condemned his decision to take the law into his own hands. Emma's story became a rallying point for stricter drunk driving laws and victims' rights advocacy, ensuring that her death would not be forgotten. Thanks for watching. Click the next video to discover more shocking stories about when revenge turns deadly.